Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Distil-Nation NZ podcast. This is the podcast all about the New Zealand spirits industry, and so we go direct to the distillers, direct to the people in the industry to help inform you, the consumers. My name's Tom. I run Herrick Creek Distillery here in Christchurch, and this is my friend Cameron, who runs...
Discovering Dram's Whisky Tastings and, I should say, spirits tastings, because it's not just whiskey, and I do have some non-whiskey tastings all locked in the calendar. But Tom, One of us has got to change.
I think we look cute.
So you may remember, if you have listened to other episodes, I casually threw it out. We call it an on-the-air production meeting where we had not talked about it previously, but I casually threw out the suggestion that when we were going to Dramfest, we should get some Distil-Nation t-shirts. And then I promptly forgot about it and didn't mention it again. Until the week of Dramfest when Tom messages me and says, our t-shirts have arrived. I will say, so we both went on Saturday and on Sunday, but you had your t-shirt on Saturday and I wore mine on Sunday. So we weren't that couple walking around in matching t-shirts at event.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's got a big QR code on the back, so it's quite adorable. Yeah, but this episode, as you say, we're going to talk about Dramfest 2025. It was a really fun weekend. We went Saturday and Sunday, the two of us. We missed out on Friday. We didn't go to that one, but Friday we had our own event over at the Juniper Collective.
That's right.
New Zealand Whisky celebration, which was really fun. That just happened just before Dramfest, so we had some of the distillers in there, sort of rushing as much as they could before they had to go set up their own stalls over at the convention center, but it was great. So we're going to talk about that, and then at the end, I've got a few hot takes on the New Zealand whiskey, the state of it at the moment.
Yes, you said, Cameron, I'm just going to warn you, I've got some controversial opinions. Be prepared. And I said, okay.
And I'm included in this, you know. I'm not calling out anybody or anything like that, and it's going to be just a bit of fun. I think Dramfest was a really eye-opening experience. That's why I go, you know. It was to learn about what's happening and see. I just noticed your Waiheke whiskey hat. That's cool.
Yep, I did. Picked that one up at Dramfest.
Oh, I didn't even know they had them. Oh.
Well, hey, it's all about who you know. I want to start with a massive thank you. I don't say this to sound important. I really don't. But we had a bunch of reactions on the day. Everything from a couple of people who came up and said, hey, you're that guy who does those whiskey videos on TikTok. And I said, thank you. I think I am. I think hopefully I'm the guy you're talking about. Thank you. All the way up to the gentleman who was pouring on Saturday for Billy Walker's Infrequent Flyers at that table, and he saw me and he said, I've never seen him before, Cameron, love the podcast, really loved that episode about the history of distilling and the moonshiners and that kind of thing. I've listened to that and I've taken that info back to the bar where I work, and I use some of those stories to tell my customers. It was awesome. That one, definitely, that hit me right in the feels.
You were pretty struck, yeah.
I was, hard not to be on a high for the rest of the weekend when genuinely we said, if you see us, come up and say hi, and you did. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for saying hi. To know that there are actually people who enjoy what we do is a rush. So thank you so much.
I will say, too, that was the week that I was on 7 Sharp for my brief little thing. And so at I was working the whole day at the Juniper Collective on Friday, and I had 3 different people I'd never met be like, I saw you on TV the other night.
Hey!
I said, oh, yeah, that's me. Yeah. And the one lady said to me, oh, you look thinner. I was like... Hey, that's a compliment. Great, I'll take that.
I'll take that as well.
Yeah. And then, at Dramfest too, same thing. It was really neat to see people. Some fans I'd met before of Herrick Creek, some people from the podcast. So it's just so much fun. I love that stuff.
Great atmosphere.
Yeah. Now, I actually did some of the counting here, and there's definitely over 100 brands, 100 whiskey brands, and rum. There was some rum that attended Dramfest, which is huge
Yes.
turnout for. I think it was fewer, we said, than maybe previous years.
Well, that is exactly it. So, yes, I have got my 2025 booklet.
Oh, yeah.
I have also got my 2023 booklet.
That one looks in mint condition.
Oh,
You could sell that on eBay.
No, well, no, not quite, because if we go through it, I've
yeah.
still got my
You've written, yeah.
notes and everything else. And so, yes, still heaps of brands, but when I was going through the old one and this one here, there's some very notable exceptions of people who were at the last one.
Oh, yeah.
I think the biggest would have to be Buffalo Trace.
Yeah. I know Maker's Mark was part of previous ones as well. So, yeah, we're definitely missing a few American brands, bigger American brands that were previously involved.
Yeah, a couple of Australian ones as well. Overeem didn't make it over this time.
Yeah.
And a couple of Scotch brands as well. Here's an interesting take. So, Dalmore, which is run by Hancock's, did not have a stand that you could go to, but you could pay an extra $30 and go into. They ran a few tastings over the day. Really funny to see that there was one guy. It was kind of like when, if you've ever done a tour of, when I was in Italy and we did tours in art galleries or churches or something like that. They'd give you these headphones, and somebody else would have the microphone, so they're all listening in on their headphones, so they could do that, and they weren't then trying to scream over the noise of the event. Dalmore is one of those premium brands that I know a lot of people would go up to the table and grab it just so that they can say that they've tried it, because it's probably not a bottle that's just going to fit into the everyday kind of budget. So by putting a $30 gatekeeping thing, it's going to stop the tire kickers from coming in and holding out their glass and saying, give me your most expensive whiskey. But it's still, look, I understand that it's $30 on top of the $90 ticket that you've already paid. Sure, I get that. But yeah, what do you think about this whole, we're going to gatekeep it a little bit just to stop the tire kickers, but if you want to experience it, we will put on a like $30 for a 5 whiskey tasting that I think I was talking to our friend Nigel, who said that if you'd wanted to buy each of the bottles, you were looking at over $10,000.
Yes, I did see some of the price values for those tastings, and it was expensive.
And so when you think about, all right, I've paid a $30 entry fee to try some pretty spectacular stuff, that then kicks out the people who just give me your most expensive and don't actually care about the story or you know, the level of quality or anything else. What do you think?
I think that was one of the things with previous Dramfest that's pushed away some of the retailers, you know, the brands, because it's people who go around, they just want to get one of everything. They want to try it all, you know, and it's just, they get to the booth, they say, give me your most expensive one. They don't even care what it is.
And I heard it. I heard people saying it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I can definitely see that being a detractor, because, you know, this isn't a money-making event for the brands. This is absolutely a marketing event. Like, they don't get to sell their bottles directly. Like, Whiskey Galore has the shop, but not everything's for sale, for sure, you know? So it's definitely a get out there, taste it, but like, it's tough, eh? So I like the idea of $30, go for this tasting of your premium stuff. It wouldn't work for everything, though, you know? No. You couldn't have a Glenfiddich, you know, 12, 15, 18 for $30. I wouldn't pay it, you know?
Yep, fair. But if we stuck with Glenfiddich, I know that they absolutely do have some ultra premium range. So if you were going and knowing that, you can still go to the Glenfiddich stand, try their 12, 15, 18, but if they then have, all right, pay your entry fee, and if it just stops that entitled attitude of just give me your most expensive, and then as soon as it's in the glass, they're off, they're out, they're not sticking around to have a yarn. Yeah. If it stops that from happening, or at least you feel like when they do that, you aren't then using up your most expensive stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I I've had a thought for a long time too that a fun way to do it would be you go to this event, you've paid your ticket to get in, but then you pay, I don't know how much is a roll of dollars, 25, like $25, right? Something like that. Okay, so you buy a roll, you buy 2 rolls, whatever, and then you go to each stand, and each of your tastings is $1. Right, so you drop $1 coin in. Okay, there you go. These are your tokens.
That's something I wanted to talk to you about as well, because listening to other people who do whiskey festivals overseas, and the entry ticket to get in might be cheaper, but then you're paying like £1 or £2 per tasting, which then slows you down. And you are then looking at the booklet, and you're not just going to keep, forcing your glass out. You're actually going to stop and think, okay, of these, which do I want to try?
Yeah.
Now, £1, £2, or in our case, $1, $2 is a nominal sum, and it's certainly far, far cheaper than what you would pay if you were going to a bar.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if it just slows you down a wee bit so that you're a bit more thoughtful about what you're doing,
I'd be keen. I'd be all in. I love it.
If it offset the cost to get in.
Yeah. A little bit. I wouldn't imagine it would drastically change, but for sure a bit. But I would be absolutely fine walking around with a roll of. I always call them loonies or toonies because I understand the dollars, $2 coins is such a boring way to say it. But and then just chuck your dollar in. Okay, I'll have that one. And it would make you think about it more.
Yes.
Because I also wrote down here I had at least 53 drams over the 2 days.
Wow, I haven't done the tally, but I probably could.
I think you had more.
I may well have done. But it is also worth mentioning that they are not full pours.
No.
They are not big measures at all.
They're like 5 mils, 10 mils maybe.
And there were multiple points throughout the day that we took ourselves off, got some food, sat down, had a chat, wrote some notes. And every day we actually walked out under our own steam.
And we were chugging water as well.
That we were. There were some people who were asked by management to politely vacate the premises. Some people who perhaps were in there for a good time and not a long time. Which inevitably happens at these kinds of things.
And I will say, when you put like thousands, really, of men, middle-aged white men, let's be honest,
we're the majority,
pale, stale male, in a room, and they're all drunk. I mean, really, at least tipsy, and there's quite a few drunk ones. I was surprised how civil it really was. There was absolutely really. I didn't look around and think like, this is a
dangerous
a wreck. It was absolutely everyone tried their best to be on their best behavior. So. There's always going to be the exception, but So I said 100 brands for sure, 100 plus, but I counted 12 New Zealand brands as well within that, within the book.
And Dramfest / Whiskey Galore did make a post to say that this is the most or the largest New Zealand representation at a Dramfest to date.
Very exciting,
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So I think that says something about. Because if we can talk for a moment, you aren't there. I think there are minimum requirements. You can't just have one whiskey or one expression.
Yeah, because I know there's a couple brands in New Zealand that they have one whiskey. They haven't been invited because they only have that one.
Sure.
I'm just not big enough. Like the amount of bottles some of these brands were telling me they were going through is at least a dozen, and
wow.
of each whiskey, like. That's a lot of whiskey to just give away, and they're paying to be there, quite a good sum to be there as well. So, it's expensive, and I would be out of whiskey probably if we did that. So I'm always happy to just go there and enjoy it. I think it's fun enough to go chat and be involved that way. That way we can experience the different things that are coming out.
Yes, but also, we had great chats with Mark and Ro at the Waiheke table, people that we don't get the chance to talk to face all that often. Soren was down with 1919 and his he had 3 whiskies, but 2 of them were brand new. It was very, he invited us around the back of the table, and I'm thinking, Soren, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then he says, no, it's just, I don't have to shout over the table to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's legit. That checks out.
Yeah.
And so he had the ex-bourbon cask, which was new.
That was neat.
And then he had the ex-rum cask.
That was
And
new.
then when he says, boys, do you want the 46%, or would you like the cask strength of that rum cask? And that was the under the table one there that he had. So that was that was exciting. But yes, it was just to people who we know them, they know us, but to actually just have some really good face-to-face conversations, fantastic. There's no substitute.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I have some highlights I've written down.
Go.
I mean, I have quite a few. If I'm honest.
Okay.
But I guess give me what was your one big highlight for the weekend? What was the one?
If we're talking about special experiences, and I told Anthony on the day, great gimmick, and I don't mean any offense by calling it a gimmick. It's a gimmick, but it's a great gimmick. They brought in a barrel, and so they had the barrel of their peated Divergence Society barrel pick, and they had the Valanche there, the Whiskey Thief, that I don't think everybody was allowed to pull their own.
No.
And Anthony was very clear. He's like, Cameron, here is the line, and you can't fill it up past that line. That's all right, sir. I can do that. So I don't think everybody got to draw it out. But the fact that they had the barrel there and they're drawing out, hey, this is straight from the barrel, doesn't get any fresher than that. I was allowed to draw my own wee sample out of the barrel directly into the glass. That was the whiskey that we were originally promoting the progress report on.
Yep.
It's been another year, incredibly. So I don't know when that one's going to be released. It must be soon.
It's
But
2.5 years old. We tried it at now, so
okay.
yeah. I think he said it was coming soon.
Soon.
So
Soon is as far as we've got. But yes, highlight for me, getting a barrel thief, drawing my own sample out of the barrel, and that was my first dram of the day on Saturday.
Mine too, and that is the top of my highlights list. That was fun. That was really fun.
Oh, it was great.
I'm glad we agreed because it was super unique. No one else brought their own barrel to pull out.
and right next to them was Jim Beam, and they had a cornhole board that you could go up and play cornhole. Actually, that was going back. That was something else missing. Usually, Famous Grouse is there, and Famous Grouse has a massive stand where you do something like try to pass a rugby ball through a target, or they've got a putting green, or they've got a because Famous Grouse sponsors Scottish rugby, so they had like that. Loch Lomond, who have an association with golf, they've had a wee putting green. There were fewer things like that.
Yeah.
But sometimes, like, you've got to do something else in order to, what's going to stand out of, look, if you've tried 50-something drams, what are you going to do to kind of stand out in the mind of the consumer? If it's a big marketing exercise and you want that person to remember, next time they go to the liquor store, oh no, got to try that really cool thing that stands out.
Yeah.
You're going
to remember pulling that whiskey out of the barrel.
Yes.
Oh, that was Divergence.
Yeah,
That's right. I remember that one. Yeah. No, I thought that was really cool. And the other second one I had on the list, because it was fun and different, unique, was the Moonlight Creek from Reefton. We got to try their 2 new makes. Well, what new make was it? It was they were progress reports.
Yes.
Fairly young still, but do you remember the barrels were? They'll be in the book, but
they will indeed be in the book.
I have to say that they were both so clean, like beautiful. You can definitely taste the youth in them still, but like they were clean. They were fruity, creamy, and they just had a lot of potential for the aging. They just needed more of that barrel for sure.
Definitely a lack of barrel influence, but they were just unbelievably packed with flavor for something so young.
And I think it was the distiller we chatted to there. He was chatting to us about. He comes from Scotland and he's worked with quite a few big brands. He was telling us about, and it was actually one of those conversations I kind of wish we had recorded because it was a pretty good little chat we had with him.
It was, but it's a very noisy environment. And even though I did have my microphones with me, I just wouldn't have trusted the audio to be broadcastable.
Yeah, and it was a surprise. I didn't really know we'd be able to try them there. I didn't realize we'd actually get a chance. I can see you're having a hard time finding the page.
I struggled with the book on the day.
It's been a bit difficult.
Here it,
no, that's Scapegrace, yeah. I don't know. Maybe they're not. Maybe
they were definitely in here because I wrote notes.
It's because you're rushing now.
Yes, exactly.
But no,
Reefton. There we go. So 2 years old ex bourbon, and 2-year-old ex Oloroso sherry.
Yeah, the ex bourbon was my pick.
I wrote banana custard with vanilla biscuit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other one, fruit and banana, still quite young but lovely.
Yeah, clean young. Like that was the nice thing about it. Yeah, some new make can be quite dirty, but that was beautiful. No. So very excited because they said I think he might have said maybe later this year, was it? Or
I can't remember.
Yeah, so he said soon for sure. I think it's we're within a year of getting our first releases from them. He didn't really tell us any pricing or anything like that, but like very, very interesting to see what happens with that one. The other one we were talking about earlier, Pocono, the new Pocono single cask.
Yep. And Aaron, who is the sales manager, brand rep. Shout out to Aaron, who got me dead to rights because it was on the Friday event at yours that I was having a wee chat with him, and he said, look, can't tell you all of the details. You're going to have to come into Dramfest to see for yourself. But it involves a 100-year-old whiskey barrel and whiskey, which, if I'm knowing you, you're already fizzing to do an episode about it if it's history, barrels, and whiskey itself. And I thought, yeah, you got me.
Yeah.
you got me. But an unbelievable story of a barrel that had come to New Zealand, to Lyttelton Harbour over 100 years ago, had then ended up as a prop table inside of Whisky Galore.
Okay.
And had sat in Whisky Galore for many years. And then, I don't know how the conversation started, but basically they then shipped that up to Pocono, was it a porter or sherry? Again,
I can't remember. Yep.
But basically kind of recharged it, filled it up, and then put whiskey inside. And so, this old barrel that has been new life breathed into it, and so that was one of the Dramfest exclusive releases, and I'm like, oh.
It was pretty unique, that. And it had this nice old Christchurch stamp on it, and it was painted real nice. And they had it there at Dramfest.
Yes, they did. This is the barrel.
The barrel, and it was great. It was a great whiskey. I had nothing bad to say about it. I was sending people over to try that one for sure.
Yes, that was one.
So I think it's called 121, I think, is it what it was? Yes. Single cask 121 or something like that. The 1919 Trans-Pacific, the rum cask, really good. That's a Jamaican rum cask. We tried the cask strength, like we said. That was great.
Yes, and it was, and he said it's a Jamaican rum, and I am the first to admit I'm not an expert on whiskey, let alone on rum, but it wasn't just like it's got a sweeter kind of finish. It's a rum finish. No, that was bold and had some of that funk. You really could go like,
rum funk. Absolutely.
This is a Jamaican rum finish.
That's what you always worry about sometimes with the barrel finish, that it's just going to be something really boring. But no, that one was fun and unique, and I'm looking forward to grabbing myself a bottle of it. The New Zealand Whisky Collection had their new Cyril Solera release. So Cyril had worked at the old Willowbank distillery, and then he now works at what have you got there?
I have a wee sample of that Solera release.
Oh, do you?
I do indeed.
Are we going to share it?
I think so. That's
exciting.
I know. Don't ask me.
Cyril, he's been working there for a long time. He's had his hands in just about every batch of whiskey that's come out of there. And so what they've done is they've taken a bit of every whiskey that Cyril's ever had his hands in. They've started their own Solera system, And Michael was telling us from the New Zealand Whisky collection that basically this first batch, they've done a bunch of bottles for it, but now from now on, when they have to do new bottles, you order one on the website. He's just going to go straight to the cask with the bottle, open it up, fill that bottle, and out it goes. So we tried the first one, and then we tried the one that he had just taken out like the day before, and there were certainly slight differences to it. And I just think it's a beautiful, fruity, bright citrus kind of whiskey.
And this is the wild thing, is that you order one and then, depending on your consumption habits, maybe 6 months down the line, you order another one, it's going to be slightly different.
Yeah.
Depending on what's going in and what they've been adding to. Yeah, so, I mean, I know it's only as old as the most recent whiskey that you've put in, but there will be like 25, 30-year-old whiskey in there.
Yeah. And he even said, when I order it for the shop, I'm just going to walk up with all the bottles and just pack them all up right like that, just straight out the cask. And I just said, that is really cool. And I thought it's a unique whiskey from them. Like, it tastes quite unique, you know? It's not... It's, to me, it's brighter and fruitier. And it's just got a point of difference to their other whiskeys, which I love their other whiskeys. They're fantastic, but this one is different.
And it's sometimes 1 + 1 isn't 2 in this respect. It's greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's a lot in there. Maple syrup.
Orange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Butterscotch, yeah.
And I think just because they do, New Zealand Whisky Company has got a great range and a great range of flavours within their range, a huge range of expressions. By the time you add all of them in, and I think, and giving it time to marry and rest. Yeah, it does. It's fair. All of the people that have a go at me for having an infinity bottle where I, pour the ends of stuff in, and I'm like, actually, no, it's a legit practice.
I have to say, my infinity bottle now is like 8 years old, I think, and is my favorite whiskey by far. And I'm not even joking. And it's every time I get to open that bottle, and I've changed mine recently to an old Pocono bottle, because they're beautiful bottles. They say New Zealand whiskey and everything on it. It's just my favorite whiskey is my own
personal blend.
Your own Solera. It's fantastic. So if you haven't started your own infinity bottle, we could have a chat about that one day. We should bring both our infinity bottles in.
Yes.
Yeah, and we should talk about how you start one and then try them side by side. Oh, that'd be really fun. I've got a peated one, or a smoked one, and a non-smoked one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same here, because all you need to do as an experiment for yourself is pour yourself your favorite unsmoked, unpeated whiskey and add like 2, I'm not even kidding, 2 drops of a peated or a smoked whiskey, and it does not take much at all for that smoke to just take over.
Yeah.
I was feeling, I didn't have a fruity peated whiskey on my shelf one time, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this one's peated and this one's fruity, and I kind of went for a wee 50-50 mix of the two, and the peat completely overpowered the fruit, and I thought, no, this isn't what I want at all. I need to, hang on, blending is really hard.
It sounds so easy. You just drink whiskey, right?
No, if you want to, find the levels of what you want to do. No, being a blender is really hard to get right.
Yeah, would be.
That was a great side tangent off there. What are the...
We'll come back to that one day.
Highlights?
I did try the new Manuka smoked release from Scapegrace. I don't think you tried that one.
No, I don't think I did.
It was actually different. So now these newer releases that they had there are now in full size barrels.
Right.
Whereas the old ones were in smaller, I think 50 liter or 100 liter barrels. So now they're full size, and it was totally different to the first 6 releases we've seen from Scapegrace. Much nicer. That Manuka smoke was great. I'm actually really keen now to see new Scapegrace where it's going. That was quite cool. And then finally, I think my favorite tasting whiskey was Waiheke Altered Carbon.
Oh my goodness gracious me. What a punch. What an absolute wallop that was.
Yeah.
It was just, you know, it was aggressive in the best way possible, in that you were bringing that glass up to your nose and already it's kind of jumping out at you. Punchy, peaty, just... I fully appreciate it will not be everybody's cup of tea.
No.
But when chatting to people over the weekend and people who I know appreciate those peatier, smokier whiskies, I'm like, mate, you've got to ask them for that.
Yeah, so I went into the weekend very excited to go back to Waiheke and try the Bog Monster. So that's why I went to the tasting event, the session, to have just a bit of that Bog Monster again, because I had it in one of my tasting packs that I bought from them initially. And I loved it. I absolutely loved how smoky and peaty it was. And I was like, I got to try it again. And so go to the session. And then they've got this other one, Altered Carbon. Okay, well, I'm going to have my Bog Monster. I was very excited about that. But then I tried Altered Carbon, and it's 45 steps above Bog Monster. And I'm like, whoa, this is my new favorite thing ever. You know, like this, it's that meme. This is my favorite thing. I love this. I think about this all the time.
Yeah.
And like the exciting thing too is Waiheke's saying they're now moving to be a peated distillery. Like the whole range that we know right now with Sweetwater and everything, it's all not going to be around forever.
All right.
Yeah, this is a limited time thing. So like it's a range at the moment, but it's not going to be a range for forever. So the Altered Carbon is coming off their new stills, whereas like the Bog Monster and the Moss was off the old stills, you know? So they had new stills that came from Scotland. They still have that same geometric pattern that the old still had, but now they're able to run them really precisely. And that's what he was saying with the peat, is that he couldn't do this in the past because the still was outside. He only had so much power to give it, so he kind of just had to take what smoke he could get.
Right.
Whereas now he can really dial it in. And like with the unpeated ones, they're taking a higher cut in the ABV, where with the peated ones now, they're starting later in the run to pull it, and they're going deeper into it. And they're being really picky about that, and they're taking a ton of smoke. And they've also moved exclusively to ex-bourbon to start all their maturations, which they're getting from Pocono. They're bringing them in from overseas. It was just really exciting to hear the direction that Waiheke's going.
That is a change.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think Altered Carbon is going to be... That was kind of a placeholder name that they were using.
I think so.
They were... I know that they did run a competition to try and come up with some better names, and I still don't think that they've come up with the one that's stuck, which, in fairness, is hard, coming up with, that brand, getting the name right, getting all of that right. Yep, no, that is... there's a lot of thought that goes into that, so... It may not be called Altered Carbon when it finally comes out, but when it does finally come out, we will be shouting from the rooftops.
Absolutely. It's going to be like the Lefroy of New Zealand, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
It won't be everybody's cup of tea,
Yeah.
But if it's your cup of tea, you're filling up the teapot.
Absolutely, yeah. My shelves will be stocked with it.
Your personal shelves or the Spirit and Spoke shelves?
Both. Now, those were my big highlights. We also, Ald was there as well. National Distillery Company was there with their rums. Who else did we see? Thompson, of course, they were there.
Yep.
They have a new Manuka Smoked Two-Tone release, so it's a blend with World Whisky.
Smoke Rings. Was it
Smoke Rings, that's it.
Yes.
Yeah, that was brand new just for Dramfest.
And at a great entry price as well.
Yeah, like under $90, I think, sort of thing.
I had a great chat with Mackenzie over at Cadrona.
Cadrona, of course, yeah.
And they've come out with so I think their Dramfest release was a Chardonnay cask finish.
Yeah.
Most definitely on the pricier side, but wild with those flavors.
Yeah.
Really kind of, if you are a Chardonnay drinker, it was oaky, it was buttery, it was, yeah.
It was great, yeah. No complaints for sure. Cadrona's putting out some great stuff now. It is unfortunately just on the pricier side. That's all.
Yes. Yeah, it won't be a shelf staple at my house.
No,
but,
sorry, guys.
I definitely.
I do have a bottle of the American oak barrel
Yes.
at my house. It's great.
There's single barrel one there.
Yeah, I keep it just for special occasions. What else? What else? Was any other huge highlights for you?
I think we have. Well, are we going to move into the forums? Because the other big highlight for me came out from one of the forums.
Oh wow, let's do it. Yeah, where did you come out on the forums? Because
So-
we went to one on
Yes, we
Saturday
did.
and one on Sunday, and I think we did good because we went at 5:00,
It was the last forum for the day in
Yeah.
each instance.
which just gave us a little bit time to just sit there. We brought a dram in with us and just sort of enjoyed that, and we got to go out a little more sober than we went in.
Correct. So the first one was called The World Atlas of Whisky, hosted by Dave Broom. You know, he just come out with a book called World Atlas of Whisky.
Did he?
Fancy that. And so on that panel, we had Carly Dyer. She's an Australian, and she's the distiller over at Starward. We had Ian McWilliam, who's Scottish, and he was from...
Lochley.
That's right. Yes. So one of the newer Scotch whisky distilleries on the... I still think it's incredible that they've just come out with a 5-year-old. I'm like... Where did you come from? Also, Michael Fraser Milne,
Yep.
who I guess straddles that Scotland-New Zealand divide, and that, he absolutely, Scotch whisky is his first love, first and foremost, is Scottish, but has, lived over here for many, many years. And then Matt Thompson representing New Zealand. Yes. So, yeah, they were talking about the new world of whiskey, which of course means like New Zealand, Australia, but also very much, coming from Lochley, it's that being a newer player in a very well established and very kind of old. How do you break in as a new player in there? And so, yes, they were talking about quality of New Zealand whiskey and some history there. And then Matt Thompson talked about a previous interview that he had done for the Whiskey Exchange. And he then said, well, I was talking with my friend Cameron, and we were sitting in the front row. Yes, because I think we had just done one of the history. I don't even know if we'd published it yet. But yeah, so he was chatting to me and getting some of my notes and some of my research. And so, yeah, I was name-checked in a Dave Broom forum.
Pretty cool.
That was...
You're basically famous.
Dave did not come rushing over for my autograph afterwards. But that's okay. I didn't have a book to be signed. But no, it was still, really cool to hear these thoughts about, how breaking in, what do you have to do marketing-wise, what do you have to do spirits-wise to be a newer, younger distillery and really go up against and stand up against those older, more well-established players.
Yeah. And the one thing that stood out to me in that one was Michael Fraser Milne. At the end, almost, he said, when people come into our shop, they ask us for a New Zealand whiskey. They don't actually mean a single malt. They don't necessarily mean a single malt. They don't put New Zealand whiskey and single malt together. They're not thinking that's what they're going to get. So he was interested to see what else might come out of it. And
Yes.
that absolutely, that was like the whole forum for me. It's the only thing I've ever thought about since then. To be honest.
Was
yeah.
I got a lift home with you afterwards, and that was our conversation in the car on the way before you dropped me off. Was how much that comment, because even though blended Scotch whisky outsells Scotch single malt by a ridiculous number, when people say Scotch, I would argue that more often than not, they actually use what they mean as single malt. When somebody starts talking about Scotch whisky, I would argue that more often than not, they are talking about single malt. And even though the terms are not synonymous, I would argue that in many people's heads they are. So yes, to hear that when they come in, and they're not saying, give me a New Zealand single malt, they're saying, I'm interested in New Zealand whiskey and not necessarily meaning single malt.
Yeah, it's a distinction which I didn't realize
Very
was being
subtle,
made.
but
Very
yeah.
subtle, but yeah, for that to be noticed by him, the owner of Whiskey Galore, that's must be happening more than once, you know?
For sure.
Yeah. And that absolutely stuck with me. And I've got some more thoughts on that because the second day, what we went to the forum again at 5:00.
New Zealand Whisky is a national or regional style developing, hosted by Dave Broom. And then in that one, we had Rob Old from Old.
Yep.
We had Matt from Porkino. We had... I didn't catch the name of the person from Cardrona.
I didn't either, actually. But one of the girls from Cardrona, she was great. Yeah.
Yes. And Waiheke as well. We had Mark from Waiheke.
Yeah, yeah.
And yes, that was... What was your big takeaway? Because again, you said that there were some big statements in there that you took away with you.
The problem I had with it all was Dave Broom, he sort of said, you know, he really enjoys that New Zealand seems to have that pioneering spirit with the spirits, you know, like we have that number 8 wire thought, you know, we're just making it work, we're giving it a good go, and that someone from the crowd said as well, like the Pinot Noir finished whiskies from New Zealand seem to be in a different class, like they're much better quality than some of the overseas Pinot Noir finished whiskies.
And I mean, arguably, New Zealand Pinot Noir is in a class above when it comes to wine.
Yeah.
So if you're using a superior product there, the end product is going to be far superior as well.
Yeah. But I went into this forum just thinking about the comments the day before and thinking, well, what is unique about New Zealand whiskey? And as I'm thinking that during this forum, 3 people, you had left at this point, 3 people shout behind me for the question period, what's different, what's unique about New Zealand whiskey? And I'm not joking, 3 people shouted that question, and nobody attempted to answer it. And this sort of sat with me. This has been eating at me all week. I've been sitting in contemplation with whiskey, thinking about this nonstop. And I have to say, first and foremost, that every whiskey we've tried in New Zealand is fantastic. I haven't had a bad whiskey made in New Zealand. It's all really good. 99% of it, though, is single malt, right? Probably distiller's barley, just regular old barley, in an ex-bourbon cask, or a wine cask, or a port cask, or a sherry cask, or a cask of some sort. And where does that leave it? If I told you that and I didn't tell you it was made in New Zealand, you'd say, well, you're talking about Scotch, single malt, right? So now there's certainly, you know, differentials like in this equation. Like we've got Pocono, they've tried to do the Totara cask. Of course, you know, they can't do it on a large scale. We've got the use of New Zealand peat over at Waiheke. I'm using a little bit of it. There's a few others. We've got Thompson using the Manuka smoked barley. But I struggle to see too many people really pushing to what a New Zealand whiskey can be. And here's where I'm sort of pushing this thought even further, is that if you look around the world and you look at a Canadian whiskey, yeah, it might have a bit of difference, you know, in that you distill each grain, then you blend it back together to make a Canadian whiskey. That's sort of the general style of it. But it's still a heavily single malt market with Canadian single malts. Japanese whiskey, same sort of idea, 100% barley. Australian whiskey, a lot of 100% barley. Why, you know? Why are we all pushing towards this 100% barley situation? And when you look at bourbon, so it's got a unique mash bill, right? It's got to be 51% corn, new American oak. And then Scotch, they're 2 very contrasting styles, the 2 of them, right? So if you took Scotch and bourbon next to each other, you'd be able to differentiate them. But if you took a Scotch and a New Zealand whiskey, would you necessarily be able to do that blind, you know? So I'm struggling with this. I've been thinking about it nonstop. I sleep and I'm trying to go to sleep and I'm thinking about it, but New Zealand needs more than just barley and wine barrels. I think that's the issue that I'm facing. It seems like when they were confronted with this question at the forum, nobody could tell anybody what the New Zealand style was. And I got it at one point and I wrote down in big capital letters in my book, what makes New Zealand whiskey unique? No one knows, capital letters. And I thought we did maybe know, but after that, I don't. I don't know. And what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, we're not importing a whole lot of barley or grains. One reason being we're just so far from anywhere else that to do so would just make costs prohibitive. And then you contrast that with the vast, overwhelming majority of the people making spirits are buying from Gladfields.
Yep.
And God forbid if anything, if there was just some kind of freak weather event, like there would be a lot of, that's a lot of eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
Is all I'm saying.
Absolutely. And we do have another supplier in Canterbury owned by an overseas company, and it's something Cryer malts. They do supply some of them as well, but there's only two. You can only get 2 New Zealand malted grains in New Zealand.
And I know from our many conversations with Anthony at Divergence, and he proudly says that the grain is one of the main ingredients, and that's a flavour that pulls through, and that you get that in Divergence is that they are really championing the flavour of the grain and doing that.
But is this enough?
Yeah,
is this enough to set New Zealand whiskey apart from the rest of the world when Scotland's already been doing this for hundreds of years really well? And we may make a great single malt with barley.
Yep.
Is it too late? Is it just too late for us to, are we only going to be known as this premium single malt producer? It's really hard for us to say, yeah, we want New Zealand whiskey, but the price point, when I could go to the shop and get this Scotch, that's a proven, track record on that one.
I mean, look, an advantage that we have most definitely is our climate.
Yes.
And we know for a fact that establishing Pōkeno in Pōkeno, one of the reasons for that was that microclimate that is just going to ramp your aging and maturation process up to 11.
Yep.
We don't have to sit around and wait for 8 years to get something that's worth releasing.
But is that also a disadvantage? Because now you're taking our single malts with no age statement and putting them up against 15, 20-year-old Scotches, which, people are still in that mindset that older is better, and it's going to take a lot of education to overcome that. So, great for some whiskey for sure, but is it a disadvantage for single malt in that case,
And maybe this comes back to that whole idea of people coming in, and I would hope, I'm guessing here, I don't know, I would hope that it's driven by a mindset of either I want to support local or I want to try something different, maybe a mixture of the two, and so they're coming into a shop like Whiskey Galore, hoping that they would come to a shop like yours as well and saying, I want a New Zealand whiskey, and I poured a bottle of your Dusky at a tasting for some Americans, and they loved it.
Which is awesome. Thank you.
And telling them that story, this isn't bourbon, but if Tom was to up and relocate to the United States, then it could be, and they loved it, and they loved that there were a lot of familiar elements there for them, because the majority of them were, when I asked them to put up their hands and say, okay, are you more likely to be a single malt drinker or a bourbon drinker? The majority of them, in their own time, were bourbon drinkers. Yeah. So there was something familiar there for them, but coming in with this Manuka smoked element, there was also something that was quite different, but also uniquely New Zealand. Yeah. And so for them, they were like, yeah, this is great. This is fantastic. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I love that there are distilleries like yourself. We've also got Oak and Rye from Waiheke. We've got Rye and Barley from Thompson. I really hope that we do see other distilleries try and move things forward with a mash bill, and with a blended recipe with a blended grain element. Whenever Old gets there as well, the fact that they are growing and distilling such a wide variety of grains, and I don't know. I know that they have released their oat whiskey, but again, that's just 100% oats.
Mm-hmm.
But are they going to come to market with a blend of, okay, we've got some oats and some wheat and some triticale and some, I really hope that we can put some of these other items up on the market so that we don't have a cool name like Scotch that encapsulates that whole like whiskey made in Scotland. We don't have a name for a cool catchy name for New Zealand whiskey yet. But I hope that we can retain some of that. I come in and I ask for a New Zealand whiskey, and I don't necessarily equate New Zealand whiskey with single malt. There will be a place for single malt, and I'm not saying that has to go away.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping that with the relatively recent restart of New Zealand's distilling industry, that we don't put blinkers on and think this is all that we can do.
Key whiskey. Key whiskey. Key whiskey? Whiskey.
I don't know.
No,
let's keep working on that.
No, so I do think that the way forward, and I think, I've been trying to do it here, like you say, with the bourbon mash, but with Manuka smoked barley. Like something like that is fun to just put a New Zealand element into, but I wouldn't say okay, 100% this is the New Zealand style or anything like that, Like this is a North American style mixed with Kiwi elements for sure. But I wouldn't go so far as to say this is what I want New Zealand whiskey to be. I've thought about this a little bit, and I think the two grains that are key to New Zealand whiskey are barley and wheat. Mm-hmm. I think a wheated whiskey might be the way forward for us. Those are our two biggest grains that we grow. We grow them everywhere in the country. We make good, really quality grains. I think wheat and barley. You hear me, distillers? Wheat and barley. I want to see it, and I'm going to work on it.
You're gonna. Well, at least you're practicing what you preach here. Yeah.
I think there's a lot to look at for sure, but I think we do need something different than just 100% barley. And I don't think corn is already such a big thing in the States. I do love making corn whiskey, obviously, but sure. I don't think corn's the answer. I think it's got to be grains that are unique. They're not unique to New Zealand for sure, but it's our grains. These are our big bread baskets, wheat and barley, and I'm quite keen to explore that. I think wheat as a body, and then you can use your barley for conversion, but also adding your smoky characteristics to it, whether that be Manuka or peat. And I'd like to see more peat, different areas of peat. We've all got the same peat coming from Southland at Tussock Creek, I think is what it's called. We've got Northland, we've got Waikato. There's definitely a little bit here in Canterbury. There's peat other places that might be different, and I want to taste them.
Well, that was the point that Matt was making that I got name checked for, which was that back in late 1800s, early 1900s, when their idea of a New Zealand whiskey was, we want to try and do our absolute best to recreate Scotch over here. And so they were importing peat from Islay.
Yeah.
Saying, we've experimented. It may well have been Tussock Creek, I don't know. We've experimented, but it's different. It's not the same, and we want it to be the same. So, yes, I think, and on that, this is a wonderful, wonderful segue. Not that we set any of this up, because we really don't have we really didn't. But I figured if we're going out, I think, on our closing thoughts,
yep.
I figured I've actually got one more special dram for us, which is a closing out. I don't know why I've held on to it for so long with just that little bit in the bottle.
Oh, okay. I was wondering why there were two glasses on the table. Oh, absolutely.
So, yes, your smoked South Island malt, peat and Manuka. And so there is just a tiny wee bit here.
Thank you.
But I figured if we're going out So that's the, Dramfest is over for another couple of years. There it is. That's that bottle gone.
Killed that bottle.
And
that was a big Manuka smoke element to it. I think like 90% of it, and then we had a 5% peat, and then just 5% unpeated. And that was my goal at hitting that. Hey, cheers!
Cheers.
And if you haven't ever tried this one, it's not around anymore.
No, I think that's probably why I just held on to it.
Yeah, but I'm working always on more smoky things. I love smoky whiskies. And it's been a while since I've had this one.
So, okay, we don't have to have a Manuka character to be... I mean, adding Manuka certainly does add a unique and a native element to it. Are there other elements? Are there other woods that we could and or should be smoking with?
Exactly, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But
another on-air production meeting.
But Manuka smoked salmon, I guess, is a big thing. Manuka smoked fish, right? So that's why I guess that was the obvious choice for like Matt Thompson when he was experimenting early on. Like that's what he was thinking is an obvious smoke because everyone knows it in New Zealand.
Familiar.
It's familiar, yeah. But New Zealand does have a very different flora, to the rest of the world. So no doubt there should be something else hanging around that would be an interesting smoking wood, and I'm here. I'd try it, absolutely.
This again is another callback to a previous episode, but we walked past the Glenmorangie table, and I tugged on your shirt, and I said, "Look, they've got a Tale of the Forest," which, gosh, I can't even remember now which episode it was on. But it was basically a Glenmorangie was playing around with the idea of botanicals. So they weren't smoking the grain, but they were infusing the whiskey, I think, at the point of distillation, much like what you would with gin, and infusing that with botanicals at that point. What were your thoughts on A Tale of the Forest?
It was the only whiskey I discarded.
Yep, that was same here.
Actually, it wasn't. I did try an Indian whiskey, which reminded me of walking into an Indian restaurant, if I'm totally honest with you. It tasted like that smell, which wasn't appetizing for me as a whiskey, unfortunately. Great, I love Indian food. I don't love Indian whiskey at the moment, for that one anyway. I'm happy to try some more. But yeah, that one, it was a whiskey.
That was also, I tipped the rest of that in a bucket.
Yeah. It just didn't have...
It was for me, it was confused.
Yeah, exactly. The flavors were not... They were there, but not together, and they were... Yeah, confused. It's a great way to say it. Yeah,
forest
erratic,
and not in a good way.
No. But hey, that's how you find out, right?
Yeah.
You got to experiment.
Because you asked me at the time when we were having that conversation, did you try it? And no, I hadn't tried it then. And the great thing about these festivals is I've tried it, and I can now confidently say I'm glad I did not buy a bottle.
Yep.
And that's the important thing about whiskey events, festivals like Dramfest, or, here's the plug, whiskey tastings. I've actually been organised. So if you are listening to this in March or in April, you can head along to my Facebook page or go to Humanitics. I have actually been onto it and have scheduled events. So I've got one every couple of months, and I've done that for like the next 6 months. So you can, if it's March or April, you can actually look ahead. Because sometimes I've held events and people will say, when's the next one? And I'm like, oh, yeah, great question. I should really get on and organise that. Now I can confidently say, no, I have dates for the next few months. So heading along to the Facebook page.
Yep.
I should really get a website. I really should. And that way I can actually have all of them. Or if you head to the Humanitics website and you type in whiskey tastings or discovering drams, either one of those, and that will bring up my next few events.
It's very exciting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to them. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, I had to get a plug in.
Hey, absolutely. Anytime. We do this for free, everyone. No, look, I love Dramfest. The worst part about it is that we have to wait 2 more years for the next one. It's always a long wait.
It is, but having gone to a few now, I appreciate just how much logistical planning goes into it. And actually, I spent a bit of time going around. I went to Rase and to talking to Mrs. Wills at Kilhoman and to Lockley and to Mr. Bruce over at Ardnamurchan, and just said, thank you for coming. It's a really, really long way to come for a whiskey festival and to just pour drinks.
Yeah.
When I know that there are many, many whiskey festivals over in Scotland and in Europe that would be much, much easier for you to go to. To come like 27 hours all of this way just to pour drinks for... inevitably there will be some nerds, heaps of nerds, who will go up to, the Willses and to the Bruces and to say, please sign my book.
Yeah.
I've done that.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Equally, there'll be some who, what's your most expensive?
Yeah.
So just a massive, massive thank you to everybody locally and overseas who come to make the event as fantastic as what it is.
Absolutely. And if you had some highlights, if you have any thoughts on New Zealand whiskey, I think we could do a lot more chatting about this, and I'd love to. Send us your thoughts, because your thoughts would be really fun to dissect on an episode one day. Email us. You can email us at distilnationnz@gmail.com, or just message us on any of our socials at distilnationnz. Yeah, I want to hear more people's thoughts. Everyone just tells me, oh, it's expensive, but like, yeah, I get that, but what else? Like, okay, yes, it's expensive, but like, how else could we really transform what you guys want to see out of New Zealand whiskey? There's got to be more to it than just price. Yeah.
Yep, fair. What makes a New Zealand style? What else could we be experimenting with?
Yeah. You're talking to the distiller, one of them right here. I talked to all the other whiskey distillers. Let's get on to it. Yeah, I think we still got time to really pull something. I know we're young.
Yep.
But there's a lot of time, and we can still help the new guys coming in to create something unique, so that we're not all just creating single malts with wine finishes. I just love them. Fantastic. But let's see what else we can do. Cheers.
Cheers.